All right, my clock says 11 o'clock, so we're going to get going. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on job search strategies, not only during the COVID crisis, but you're going to learn things today that you can leverage down the road. My name is Dave Templeman. As you can see, I'm joined by Nas Malik and Denise Cruz. We're part of AdamsGabbert. We like to say we're surprisingly different, obsessed with innovation, and creators of deliberate impact. We are the real deal. So our website is there. We hope you enjoy the webinar. Just real quick introductions. Some of you know me, some of you do not. My name is Dave Templeman. I'm the Director of Staffing Services here at AdamsGabbert. I've been with them for just a little over 2 years. I run our staffing team. I've been doing this for 20 years. I like to tell people that you generally will look for a job maybe a dozen times or so in your entire career. I help dozens of people every single week with job search strategies, and so hopefully I'll have some content that you can use yourself.
Hi, my name is Nas Malik. I am the HR manager at AdamsGabbert. I've been with the company about 3 years, and I've been in the HR industry about 6 years. I'm hoping we can give you some tips and tricks and make your job search a little bit easier.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Denise Cruz, and I'm the CEO of AdamsGabbert. And I started in this business in recruiting actually in 1987, which I recognize is before some of you were born. But we collectively have quite a few years of experience of helping people with their job search in this metro area specifically. So at this point, I think I'm going to take the next one. Okay, all right.
It should have
had
changed.
a little glitch there on the internet. Great, thank you so much for spending your time with us this morning. We've packed in, as Dave said, an hour of advice and concrete actions. I wanted to spend just a minute on who we are and why at AdamsGabbert we're hosting this free webinar. So, first of all, our first line of business or area of expertise is technology services, which is where we become the outsourced IT department for small to mid-sized businesses. Our second area is in our payroll services area, and that is literally when a client already knows who they want to hire onto their team, and we provide the backdrop is all the administrative and HR functions in the background for that. The third area is our advisory services, when clients present a problem for us to solve. And as our consultants, we're responsible for the solution we deliver. And then finally is our staffing services, which is again why we're here. And it's our longest cornerstone of who we are at AG. Since when we were founded in 1999, we started off with staffing of IT and project managers. So it's our largest line of business. It's also the main reason, like I said, we're collected here with you today. We currently at AG focus on IT recruiting, but we recognize that's only a small subset of who we might have on this call today. What we've learned over the many years is that there's a lot of tools and vehicles and tips that we'll be able to provide to you from our side of the desk, as well as to help you in your job search, whatever that is, in the range of positions, in the range of experiences you have, and hopefully help you differentiate yourself a little bit in this new world of finding a job. So let's get started. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you bet. So some of you probably have been on a Zoom conference before. There's a Q&A box. Please use that to ask questions. We'll try to answer them in real time, and if we can't get to them in real time, we'll answer them at the end of the webinar in our Q&A section. And especially use the chat feature. I just saw John Foster's on the call. It's good to see you, John. Thanks for joining us. So chat with each other and have a discussion. That's great. We will email this deck out after the webinar. We have several resources at the end so you can have the information. And then we also are recording the webinar, and you'll get a recording of the webinar as well. I just want to take a quick poll. We've got about 25 people in here. You can use the raise your hand feature How many of you have been impacted by the COVID crisis, job-wise? Eight, 9, 10, here they come. Yeah, it's serious. And so that's why we're doing this. We want to see if we can give you some help. So here's some of the things that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about search strategy tactics. We're going to talk about things that have changed. There's been some good changes with COVID, as well as some negative changes. What hasn't changed, and what some of our next steps are. And the Q&A section, we're just calling what else can we do to help. So we just want to make sure that we're listening to your voices and can address any concerns or questions that you have. The meat of this is strategy and tactics. So let's start with that. I think the first thing that that I want to make very clear to people is you can thrive in this environment. And so here's some things to think about. You definitely are not alone in this, and you should not try this alone. You have close family, you have friends, you have colleagues that will help. We'll talk about how to leverage your network and build your network. You have value. Unemployment right now most likely is a result of an economic decision and not a personal decision. So the things that make you who you are, your experience, your education, your knowledge and expertise, your passions and interests, they're all still intact. Even though you may have a short detour in your career, it's not going to have a long-term 5-10 years down the road if you play it right. So one of the things that I also want to talk about is clean slate. It's a great time to make decisions about where to take your career. Some people were released from a job maybe they didn't like too much. Some people were on a career trajectory that really wasn't fitting them. And so this is an opportunity to take that and just completely wipe the slate clean and do something new. I'll give you an example. I came out of college and really didn't have a lot of direction, and so I got a job at a piano store selling pianos because my mom's a piano teacher and knew the guy that owned the store. And that turned into 10 years of selling pianos, 8 of which I really didn't like, and I wish I could have gotten out quicker. But thankfully, I was able to get out through a connection, and I got into recruiting 20 years ago. It was a great transition. All the things I learned selling pianos was transferable. We're going to have some resources in the links to click that will talk about that. There's 4 books that you can read, like 48 Days and Proximity Principle. And then there's quite a few websites that you can leverage to learn how to take that clean slate and start to put some color to it. So Denise, I'm going to turn it over to you for actions to get started.
Great, thanks, Dave. So these are some really concrete things that you can do. And as Dave said, we'll make this PowerPoint available later, but if you want to take some notes on some of the detail of this, feel free, obviously, to add that. The first one is our list of career accomplishments. These are, take out your pen and your notebook. It's the old school with a written page, I believe, works best with this. Carry it around for a while. Jot down all the bullets of your career accomplishments. And this is not just your most recent, it's your entire career. And literally list, not a paragraph, but a bullet of what is that specific accomplishment. If you can put measurement to it, do so. So it could be anything from increased achieved sales goal for the last 3 years, X% over, etc. It could be designed and implemented a new graphic for the line of business that resulted in X social media hits, blah, blah, blah. It could be anything like that, but just list some career accomplishments. From there, once you've gotten that down and you said, I don't think I have anything else to add, then put them into a few buckets, and only then. So 3 or 4 maybe buckets of titles, of themes of what that is. One of the things that I did when I did this myself many years ago was I recognized through this that there was a lot of opportunities that when I came in that I turned it around. I got something that was broken and I was able to fix and turn it around, and that helped shape my job search and how I was differentiating myself as someone who could accomplish turnarounds. So whatever that might be for you, you'll have your own buckets, but look at that. Maybe it's operational excellence, maybe it's business development, but there will be other themes throughout that. And then hang on to that. We're going to get back to this. The next one is to establish your have to have, can't haves, and neutral list. This is really important, and this might change today from what you thought it was a few months ago, and it might change again in another few months or year. But for now, what is your have to have, can't haves in neutral? Are you willing to relocate? Are you willing to travel? What percent? What is your compensation that you must have? What is your desire? What kind, are you better in a large organization or in a small one? All of those kinds of things that fit them into one of those three categories. This will help you filter in the best ones that are fit for you. Then practice and prepare your elevator speech. And for this, you've all heard this, it's 20 to 30 seconds. It's not talk fast and put 2 minutes of data into a 20 to 30 second talk. It's really 20 to 30 seconds. And your goal is to have the end of it be one where you lead the person you're talking to into wanting more information, to asking you a question that then you hopefully can have a little bit of a dialogue about. When I say practice, I mean in front of a mirror, video it and play it back in front of other people when they ask you what you're looking for, so it rolls off your tongue and doesn't sound like it's a prepared speech. Then the next two are really important right now, and this is get your daily schedule set, get up at the same time, get showered and dressed, sit in a special workplace that is your place at home. Make sure that you're following a schedule. Put a calendar out just like you would for your meetings. From 10 to 11, I'm going to make these calls. From 11 to 12, I'm doing research on company, etc. That kind of thing throughout your days. Then give yourself rewards when you hit those goals along the way. When you set up 3 really critical meetings next week, make sure you've got that and that you've got that on your calendar, but then make sure that you reward yourselves. Take a break, take a walk with your kids, play a game, whatever that might be, but reward yourself a little bit. And then when you do get those meetings set up, make sure that when I was back to the career accomplishments and you've got those typed up, take those with you if we get back to in-person soon. Read them in the car the last 5 minutes before you walk in, or if you're on video, it's great, you can have them in front of you. But those are your examples that are fresh in your mind and your accomplishments. Rereading them will make you remember how great you really are and how much you've accomplished. And it'll also be those stories so you don't walk out of that meeting at the end and say, oh, I wish I would have thought to say blank. So I'll turn it back over to you, Dave.
Yep, and I just cannot emphasize how important those career accomplishments are, that you have them written down, that you know them, because we're going to talk about them again and again in this presentation. So let's talk a little bit about marketing. Most common thought is a resume and a cover letter is what I need to find a job, and that's certainly part of it, but it is by no means all of it. There's a term that's been used, maybe you've heard it, it's called personal branding. It's making yourself a brand. About a decade ago, I decided to put up a website called That Job Guy and help people with career counseling. And so all of a sudden now I become That Job Guy, and you can find it on my LinkedIn and so forth. And there are people that know me as That Job Guy. So that's a brand that's stuck. It's worked well for me. I want to talk about LinkedIn and what the difference is with LinkedIn and a resume, just with your profile. On LinkedIn, you can have a real nice profile. Resumes have some limitations. There's rules, there's best practices, there's content limitations. For example, a LinkedIn profile, really the best practice is have a picture there. On a resume, it's completely opposite. You really don't want a picture on your resume. LinkedIn gives you so much more space to tell your story and to list your accomplishments and to go into detail as to what you have to offer someone. Typically, a 2-page resume is about what you want. If you have a Word document, 2 pages is about all you really are going to have the attention of a reader. But because of our natural habit in when we're online to scroll, we can scroll all day. You can put as much stuff on LinkedIn as you want. There's a 2,000 word just in the introduction for LinkedIn, and 2,000 words is about 2 pages on a resume. So you can be a lot more, you can have a lot more information. You can also let your personality shine through. I think resumes tend to be more, I call it resume speak. It's a very formal and there's a lot of common terms that I see. And so there's just a lot of differences between having a good LinkedIn profile and a good resume. We'll probably do some follow-up things, and one of them will be on LinkedIn, so we can get into that. They have a great help too. Other social media. This is very important because employers are looking at you if you are active on social media. They're looking at Instagram, they're looking at Twitter, they're looking at Facebook. So I always say be positive, let your personality show through. Don't be a constant complainer. And I'm very guilty of going out and espousing opinions on social media. I try to temper it now because it really does come into who you are, and the decisions that we make can come down to those very critical elements. I always say don't post anything to social media that you wouldn't want to show your grandma. So just be very aware of that in this process. Thought leadership. This is something that is part of your personal brand. It's people come and recognize you as an expert. I'm recognized as that job guy now, and so I'm an expert on helping people with career transition. But I got into that because of my work with staffing. There's a lot of professional organizations that you can get involved with to learn and to lead. We're in the IT space, and so there's the Agile KC group. There's a lot of different professional associations with technology, but NUS is in human resources. So there's a group called Society of Human Resources Management that she's a member of. I've been in sales my entire career. There's a National Association of Sales Professionals here in Kansas City. You want to get involved in these groups because that's part of the network, which we'll get into in just a second. But you definitely want to be a thought leader. And NUS, I love your mentors and champions story. So you take that piece of this.
Thanks, Dave. So mentors and champions is something I learned about when I got to AdamsGabbert 3 years ago. So mentors and champions, you have these people in your network currently. We just have to identify them. How I differentiate those is as follows. So mentors are people who give you advice. They'll tell you stories, help you navigate some tough situations. They're going to impart their wisdom. And champions are a little different. They are going to take an active role in your job search. They are the ones who are your voice when you're not around. So they are the ones opening doors for you. They are putting your name into consideration for positions. They are the ones marketing you actively when there's an opportunity. So identify these people and categorize them so you know how to leverage them better for your job search.
Great. And this transitions real well into building your network. I'm going to start with the circles because everybody has circles. You have your crew. I call them your crew. You've got 5 or 6 people that are your crew, and your champion is probably one of those. So these are people that are actively involved. They know what's going on in your life, and they are doing everything they can to help. And then outside of that, you have friends, and everybody has a bigger circle of friends. These are people that you know well, that you probably talk to on a frequent basis. You see them at school, you see them at church, you see them at work. They also are probably very familiar with you, but it's more of a personal than an in-depth. And so those are people that you want to be giving a little more information to so they can help engage. And then the outer circle of your existing network is the acquaintances. So it's people that maybe I know their name, maybe I know their face. I see them every once in a while. We say hello. We might have some small talk, but we really don't get in depth with those people. So those are all part of your existing network, but there's a lot of people that are missing that you can put into this network. And so you want to get people closer to the middle. Now, I'm not saying that you need to build a crew of 30 people because that's just not sustainable, because the crew relationships are really important, but you do want more friends. You want more people that know a little more about you and can help you out. So who's missing from the list? If you have competitors that you've gone up against in the past, your customers can be part of that. Employers that have interviewed you before, they were interested before, maybe they're interested now. I got into this business after interviewing in April 2000 and getting a no, and I went back in September of 2000 and got a yes. That happens. If you have kids, the kids circles, the teachers, the coaches, the other parents, the people that are involved in your kids' activities. I call the personal business connections, your auto mechanic, your vet, your handyman, whoever. These are all people that already know you, and so you can help engage with them to get things going. Virtual networking, this has been such a big thing for so long now, and so people are used to it, especially now, because everything we're doing has been virtual for the past 8 to 10 weeks. So LinkedIn is the de facto platform for business networking. It's, you know, we talked about the profile on the previous slide, but it's a great networking tool. I call it my cyber buddy army. I've got 6,000 some odd connections, and so I can reach out to them directly. I know probably, oh, maybe a quarter of them I've met in real life and just through work. But they're people that are willing to help, and so build that. I'll talk about Meetup here real quick, and we'll talk about it one more time. Meetup, if you haven't heard of it, is a social media platform that has a meeting element to it. There are groups based on interests. The online meetings have started popping up from these because we can't meet in real life, but typically the active groups will have a once-a-month meeting, and so they're great opportunities. There's special interest groups on Facebook. There's special interest groups on Twitter, Reddit, all of these different places. The job boards are a good source of information, and they can be a good source to bring in some networking. Applying for a job and waiting for a response is typically not a good strategy. It's just doesn't work. But if you see a job that you're well qualified for, and you can find somebody that either is in that company or knows somebody that's in that company, and you can get to that individual, bring them into your network, and you can use that as a good lead generation technique. And then finally, there's all sorts of business publications that you can leverage to find out who I need to be pulling into my network. All of the Chamber of Commerce's have a member directory. The Kansas City Business Journal publishes a book list. Ingram's publishes a list every single year. And so these are great resources that you can use to do some research and figure out who you want to have in your network, because using your network leads to referrals. And Denise, you're the expert on that, so I'm going to let you take that.
Thanks. So referrals are obviously a way to get your foot in the door, and it's a way to get noticed. And that's really what you want to do when there's a lot of people applying for the same job. You are trying to figure out how to get that little edge. So referrals work. They do. You think about it in your personal life. When you go to buy a large ticket item, you're usually asking people around you for referrals. When you want to purchase a service, same thing. So it's the same thing when I get a lot of calls and people reaching out asking if I can connect with them and help them connect into the community, into certain companies, etc. And when I get the call that is from someone that says, or an email that says, hey, would you take a few minutes and meet with so-and-so, then I am immediately going to take that call or that meeting, because someone I trust has asked me to do that. And that's how it works in referrals. So how do you cultivate referrals? Well, as Dave said, you pull all from, and I know people in every single way that Dave his examples that have gotten jobs. And so it all works, but it's not an or, it's an and it's a plan that you use all of it. But when you are talking to someone in any situation, then don't be afraid to say, now that you know more about what I'm looking for, or what I'm good at, who should I be talking to? Who do you know that I should talk to? And they'll give you a couple names. And then you simply ask, would it be all right if I use your name and let them know that you referred me? They're going to say yes, or they wouldn't have given you that name. Most likely, they're going to say yes. But then you can take it a step further and have them actually work for you on that. And you can say, you know, would it be okay if would you be willing to shoot a quick email, copy me on it, let them know I'm going to be reaching out. That way, I will immediately take you off the thread so you won't be bombarded with the conversation. But they will know that you actually referred them. It will help me, but it will also help you in that they won't be trying to contact you and say, hey, what do you know about this person? Whatever. You can just say they're going to reach out to you, and then I will, and then I'll take you off that thread. That, most of the time, they're going to say yes. They're not going to offer that because it takes time to do that. It takes a minute. But the great news is if you do that, you've just surfaced yourself and differentiated yourself above the rest. The other thing is if you've been CC'd, you know that actually if it's happened. And if it hasn't happened, then you can reach back out in a couple of days and say, hey, I know you're really, really busy. Would it be possible if I shot that email out and copied you and just said that you referred me, and then I'll take you off the thread? And again, most of the time they're going to say yes. But worst case, they say no. What have you lost? Exactly nothing, because you weren't going to get that if you didn't ask. So most of the time, it's going to be a huge help for you. And then follow up. And that's the key, is following up on those referrals. And and make that differentiation worth it.
Yeah, for sure. So now that we're getting ready to interview, we've got the job interview and the referral helped. How do we make sure that we're putting our best foot forward? So there's a couple of different steps for that. The first step begins with research. Research who you're talking to. Are these people on LinkedIn? Look at their profiles. Have you worked at a similar company, or do you have common connections? Have you been to the same university or high school? Do you have any interests or hobbies, or the people that you follow that are in common? Look at their social media as well. Make sure you find one or two things to talk about, because that's great icebreakers for those conversations. A lot of times for me, I look out and I'll say things like, "Oh, I noticed you went to KU," and that my Jayhawks kind of pull me through every single time. The other part of that is also looking at the company. What does the company actually do? And what have they been in the news for? What are their most recent press releases? Look at their social media. What are they trying to put out there? Because those are the things they're proud of. And those are the things they want you to know. And it just shows that you took the time, you made the effort to learn about the company, and you're here to have a thoughtful conversation. The other part of this is preparing. So for me, what that means is you have a couple of copies of your resume, you have a notebook and a pen or pencil to take to the interview with you every single interview. Whether it has the list of accomplishments that Denise referred to earlier, or for you to write down notes or write down questions for later in the interview, just have that on hand. Make sure you know the job description in your resume inside and out. So a lot of times people will skim through the job description, or you've written your resume a year or two ago and you've just added the most newest accomplishment to that. Just make sure that you actually look at everything on there. When it comes to qualifications for the job, do you have everything they're asking for? And if you don't, how are you going to compensate for that? Are you a quick learner, or have you worked with a technology platform that's very similar to it? So making sure you have these jotted down so you can address them in the interview. Look at the responsibilities. Do your skills align with what they're looking for? Have you done this before? If you have, to be able to talk about them. Be ready for common questions. HR people we have our standard questions that we like to ask, such as, tell me about yourself. A lot of times what I see when I ask that question is people telling me, well, I was born here and then I went to school here and then I moved, and I so want to know that, just not in the first interview. More or less what I'm looking for is, what do I need to know for this position? What is relevant to this job or this company? And give me that in a quick elevator speech, if you will. Know examples, or have examples of your strengths and weaknesses. Again, a tried and true question that we ask a lot of times. And when they ask you for a weakness, give them an actual weakness, not something like, oh, I care too much, because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a thoughtful answer. One of the things, you can say is, oh, I do this and this is a weakness, but this is what I've done to compensate for that or make up for that in the long run. What do you want to know about this job? So write those things down so you can have a more engaged conversation in your interview. You are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. So have those ready for yourself as well. And then why should I hire you? People ask that very often. And, this is your time to not be too humble. Be modest. You don't have to be modest. Tell them why you're the better fit. What sets you apart from everybody else? Why should they hire you? I tell my brother this. It's like, it's time for you to not be cocky, but really make the difference of why are you the most competitive candidate in their pool. Next up would be anticipate. A lot of times the few times I've interviewed, I always ask, what can I clarify on my resume, or is there anything on my resume that is concerning that I can address a little bit more? Anticipate them looking at your resume and saying, oh, there's a gap. You've been out of a job for 3 months, 6 months. Anticipate, them asking, tell me a little bit about why you were out of work for a little bit, or it looks like you've been at this job, the last 3 jobs, only a year at a time. Why is that? So anticipate these things. You're putting this out there on your resume for them to see. So be ready to answer these questions. And then practice. Practice is probably the most important of everything for me, especially. I'm somebody who plans a lot. I will write out all my answers and things like that for the interview. but make sure you're saying them out loud. So even for this webinar, you know, I wrote out what I was going to say, but it's so important to say these out loud because it's so different when you're actually speaking versus when you write things down. So find a, you know, a friend, a spouse, a family member who can sit there and do a mock interview with you. Have their, you know, give them the questions and then have them ask you and you answer them. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's completely fine. We're in a technology world, so find, you know, a Zoom or Skype or whatever it is that you use and record yourself doing that and be able to watch it back. I think watching your posture, I'm somebody who does this a lot. I like to touch my hair, so making sure you're not doing that. And also watching your facial expressions, you know, how do you look? Are you smiling? Are you, and things like that. So just things to kind of keep in mind. And I think these will really help you with your interview.
I love that Denise was touching your hair when you were saying don't touch your hair.
Denise
You know,
isn't in an interview.
oh, that was good stuff.
The job already.
One of the things regarding gaps, you know, right now, there's a lot of people that have a 2-month gap, and it might be a 6-month gap by the time this is all over, at least from a career perspective. And so this is an easy one to explain. So there usually is a reason if there's a gap. So it's just have a quick, clear, concise answer to it. So that's the prep for an interview. Let's talk about interviewing in general. Right now, there's always been phone interviews. Right now, we're not doing in-person interviews really, so most of the follow-up interviews are going to be on some sort of a format like Zoom. So there's some tips and tricks for these phone interviews. When you're doing a phone interview, there's 3 things that I tell you to do. Number 1, make sure that you've got a good connection. If you've got a cell phone that doesn't work good in your house, find another place to do it. Or if you happen to be someplace where you don't have good coverage, go find good coverage. You have to have a clear connection. I like using a headset because it allows me to use my hands. It also gives me a little more freedom of movement. I don't have to just sit there with a phone in my ear, and sometimes it drops down here and gets hard to hear. So use a headset when you're doing a phone interview. And the most important part of a phone interview, I think, is stand and smile because that will come through. With video interviews, also, again, make sure you've got a good connection. Make sure that you're in a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. Use a PC or at least a fairly large screen tablet because you're going to be on an interview where you're looking at people, they're looking at you, there's going to be some interaction, and a phone screen just isn't big enough to really give you a good enough view of what's going on so that you can respond. Your body language definitely matters in a video interview, and so you want to stay engaged. Again, you can probably see my hands moving around. You want to stay engaged and leaning forward and being confident in your talking. Lighting, make sure you are front lit. There's a lot of times I get on a video call with somebody and there's a big window in the background and I cannot see their face. Make sure you are front lit. Make sure that the camera is level with your eyes because this does not look good. This is much better, okay? So I've been on video interviews where I'm looking straight up somebody's nostrils, not good. And then finally, test everything before you click on the conference. Just make sure it's all working. So once you get into the interview, the first 5 minutes really sets the tone. And so one of the things I really believe is do some research on people like Ness said, find some common bonds and do a little small talk. It was Memorial Day weekend this weekend, and so that's a good place to start. Or if you're a KU or an MU or maybe an Iowa State fan, maybe you can talk about that stuff. So usually you can find a common bond with somebody. Bring your energy, bring your enthusiasm, stay positive. There will be questions about, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker, a time you didn't agree with your manager. Don't dwell on that experience. What you want to do is have a quick 20-second answer and move on. You definitely want to address any perceived weaknesses. If there's some gaps in your credentials, if there's some gaps in your experience, be prepared for that. And again, have examples ready that you pull from your list of accomplishments and from the research that you've done. If you do prep, this will not be a hard process. So have a thoughtful list of questions to go. Because they're going to want to know if you're curious about them. They're looking for interest. And so I love asking, why do you like working here? What's your favorite part of this job? You can get into some things about your background and credentials. Is there anything on my resume that you want me to clarify. And then you can start for the close, and the close is really important. There's a couple ways to go at it. I love both of these questions. You might ask one, you might ask them both at different times. It's essentially the same question, but they are powerful closing statements. Nuss gets the credit for this one. When you hire me 6 months from now, how will you know I was the right person for the job? And what a powerful question. Again, when you hire me, you are giving them an assumption that you are being hired. And then what does success look like 6 months down the road? And then the next one, which is Denise's, which I also love. Now that you know more about me and my experience and what you need, is there anything preventing you from hiring me for this job? That is absolutely a great question. It will uncover objections. We will have these, if you want these specific questions, we will get them out to you. Both great questions. When you hire me 6 months from now, how will you know I was the right person for the job? And now that you know more about me and my experience and what you need, is there anything preventing you from hiring me? Great questions. And just, be sure to go back and reiterate anything that you think is missing. Saying thanks. This is really important. Make sure you have email addresses for everybody that was on the call. Ask for them. Can I get your email address? Because you want to send a follow-up email. And we'll talk about that in a second because it's really important to just say thank you. You can go back and address gaps. And maybe if you got thrown off by a question, Nuss, how many dishwashers are in New York?
So this was about 2 jobs ago. I was interviewing for a job, which I did get, and in New York for a recruiting position. And who was supposed to be my boss, he asked, we went through the whole normal questions. And the last question he asked me is, do you know how many dishwashers are in New York? And it just threw me off. I was not expecting it. I didn't, if you could just see confusion on my face. And I hate that. But, what I did was I kind of talked him through, well, I don't know the answer to that, but this is kind of what I would, think about, or how many apartments are there? How many houses are there? And then kind of get to that question. And I'm seeing a lot of these types of questions pop up. So if you stumble on a question like this or any question at all, this is the right time to address it, is in your thank you note. Make sure you use the opportunity to say, hey, I thought about this a little bit better and this is what I think, because that'll help you close, and that'll really show the interviewer that you were really interested, you were engaged, you were listening, and you care about what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, and there are quite a few employers that will throw these types of questions at you in an interview. I used to ask people, Pink Floyd, who's more important, Roger Waters or David Gilmour? I can't do that anymore because nobody knows who Roger Waters and David Gilmour is anymore. But I call them the gotcha questions. Really, you just want to, when you get it, a good way to respond is ask a question back. Go, Pink Floyd, weren't they in the 60s? So, or dishwashers, are you talking about people who wash dishes? Are we talking about commercially available dishwashers? Really, the questions are designed to see how you think and how do you respond to the unknown. So that's really, if you can get through that, you'll be fine. Ultimately, the interview you're trying to get to is hopefully to get to an offer. And I know a lot of people struggle with the negotiation, so I want to talk about that real quick. Negotiating an offer is something that just requires a little bit of homework and an understanding of what the points of decision are. Number one, you got to know what you're worth in the market. Look at your salary history. How much have you been making up until now? Research the market. There's tons of resources, PayScale, Glassdoor, Indeed, salary.com. Just Google salary comparison and you'll find a lot of resources. And once you have all that information, you can ask other people as well. It will give you a pretty good idea of here's historically where I've been, here's what the market is for what I do right now. So you go in armed with that information. Salary is part of it, but total compensation is made up of more than just salary. You got to know how much you're paying for health benefits because that swings wildly. I got a $6,000 raise coming to AdamsGabbert just because of their insurance was so much cheaper. Some companies have performance bonuses. Some companies, if you have a commission a job where you're in a commission structure, what does that look like? Do you match 401k? Is there employee share ownership? Those types of things. Think about commute. Commute costs money, and it also costs time. Do they provide some sort of child care credit? Do they have training and development? There's a ton of things to think about. You also want to be ready with a counter. If you don't feel that they're being I don't want to say fair. If they're not where you need them to be to say yes, be honest about it. And so sometimes it might be the salary. Sometimes, and if it's the salary and they're below what you know the market is, you present the information that you have, and they probably will move. But it might be other things too. And so just negotiate with them. But at some point, you're going to come to a point where there are no other concerns and you just have to make a decision. I think you should seek counsel, whether you talk to a significant other, if you talk to a trusted associate that's in your crew, find somebody that you can at least talk to about the offer so that you know you're making the right decision. And then the final thing is make sure you make a timely decision, because we like to say it around our business, time kills deals. If you wait more than 24 hours or overnight, you're probably going to end up possibly losing the offer. I want to go into what's changed real quick. Obviously, there's been a lot of industry disruption. The entertainment industry, the service industry, the sports, I mean, all of travel, that's all pretty much at a dead stop. But there's other industries that are really thriving. Anything that has to do with shipping and logistics, anything that has to do with healthcare. There's a two-edged sword. There's lots of opportunities that have been presented because of COVID, and there's other positions that have pretty much been eliminated. There's been a shift in demand. So there's a lot, I call them survival jobs. If you can't find the job that really is right for you and your career right now, but you need to make money, there's lots of survival jobs out there. Some teachers are doing online tutoring, people are doing personal shopping. I can't remember what, it was one of the grocery shopping services. They were hiring 300,000 people just to go into grocery stores and shop for people because the demand's so high. So I want to talk about the Payroll Protect program real quick. If you find out through research that a company has payroll protection grants, it's a great opportunity. They are hiring. We had a client come to us that got a loan and they had 10 open positions, right? Just like that. If you find one that has that, certainly look into it. Working from home is probably going to be more common now. I know I found out this morning that one of our clients, they closed 3 of their offices, just closed them, and everybody's going to work from home. And they aren't even, the people that aren't going to work from home aren't going back till September. Twitter and Facebook both said everybody's just working at home. So things are going to change. And so we're starting to open things back up. Opportunities are starting to become available. So just be on the front edge of that wave. And then there's things that haven't changed. And this is just to wrap things up. I mentioned it before. Employers are hiring. You may not find the job that you absolutely want and it's the career path, but you can find a job where you can keep the lights burning and get through this. We're in a storm right now, and so any income is good income. We started with this and we'll end with it. You haven't changed. Your story has not changed. You still have value. All the things that you've learned, all the things that you've experienced are still there, and you can take that and your big list of accomplishments and walk with confidence into an employer and make sure that they know that you're somebody that they need to hire. So that's pretty much the meat of our presentation. We covered a lot of ground, and we just hit the surface of a lot of stuff. And so we want to have some follow-up for you. I'm going to find Rob here in a second. So let's talk about what's next. There's a really good, robust job club community in Kansas City, and they are groups, and I used to run one myself, that will take and unpack a lot of what we talked about. I'm going to find Rob in the list, and I'm going to let him talk for a second, because we are going to start a group that AdamsGabbert is going to sponsor. Rob, I just said you are allowed to talk. Can we hear you? Nope. Okay, that's all right. So we're going to have one starting. Oh,
There we
there he
go.
is.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to start in, with AdamsGabbert and Community Covenant Church in Lenexa. We're joint partnership with a new job club that's beginning next Monday, 7 o'clock. Initially, it'll be online through Zoom. And in the future, as we can open things up, it'll be actually at a location. The intent of the thing is just to follow, as Dave was saying, just to continue with the things that he's already talked about. It's a free, volunteer-driven resource open to everyone who needs support and encouragement while looking for a job. Our intent will be to bring in people who have different skill sets that can help us mentor and talk to people about what they want to do. Online, it's going to be primarily, educational driven because it's going to be difficult to have the interaction. But as we figure that out and as we move to a more to an actual spot where we can actually do it, it'll be more interactive with the ability to do some networking and some on the spot reviews of resumes, reviews of peer reviews of cover letters. You'll be able to do some peer reviewing of your elevator speeches and that kind of stuff. So it starts next Monday, 7 o'clock online, and I think Dave's got the connection information.
Yeah, I'll get the link. We're gonna email the link to that meeting out to everybody. So you'll get an email with the deck and that link and that follow-up information. So, and I really appreciate Rob, and Michelle's on the call too. Michelle Jost is a longtime friend of mine. She's going to be involved in leadership of this. It's our ongoing effort just to help the community and help people get through this crisis. There's a lot of online resources that you can use. There's this website called Learn How to Become. There's the Crossroads Career Network, the Muse. There's one called Agile Profiler. All of those links are in the deck, so you don't need to write that stuff furiously down. But the internet has a tremendous amount of very, very good information on helping you keep the momentum going and to help you unpack some of these things. And there's one other resource that I want Denise to talk about because she was in it for so long, and that's paid career services.
Thanks, Dave. So if you do have the privilege of your previous employer having paid for you to have some outplacement or career transition services, then I would say, and you're not taking advantage of it, then I would say do that immediately following this webinar. If they're paying for it, it's free. There will be licenses that are expensive that they will hold for all kinds of searches and research, etc., that you don't have the ability one-on-one to own. There's resources for each other to share. There's also things like career coaches that can help you with all kinds of things. Sometimes people think it's just about a resume, and it's really not. So I would encourage you to take advantage. If you don't have that, there are resources out there that do charge you, and some of them are very well worth the investment. But buyer beware on that. Again, check around to make sure. You can ask different people, including us, but I would certainly check and see who you would want to invest money with, because it is just like every other industry. There's good and there's bad, but definitely consider the career services. And if you are already privileged to have that from your previous employer, take advantage.
Definitely. And the people that you would pay them, certainly vet them, because there are some good and bad ones, and you can get a lot out of the job club community and these online resources without having to leverage that. So certainly keep that in mind as well. So that's we're at the end here. We're going to call this the question and answer. It's where do you need more help? I do have one question from Jason. The ending interview question about what's keeping you from hiring me today. The question is, what happens if the employer says there's a lot of candidates we're reviewing and we'll have a decision soon, which is a non-answer?
Right.
That's a really good question to ask, and that's why having both of these questions at your disposal is really good. Because the way you could answer that is, we're reviewing a lot of candidates. The follow-up to them is, so let's say you assume, let's assume that I get the job 6 months from now. What does success look like? That's the perfect follow-up answer to that. And they may not answer you. I mean, it's a conversation. And so I'd be very interested in sitting in and being a fly on the wall with that type of background. Another question.
Dave,
Yep, go ahead.
let me take that one, since that's the one I proposed and have had so much success from people with. So it's true, you can get the non-answer, which you're going to get, that doesn't help you. But you would be surprised how many times people will actually say, you know, we do have a lot of candidates that we're looking at, and you say, in comparison to the other candidates you've seen already, would there be anything? And then they can say, and often do say something like, you know, we asked for a little bit more experience in manufacturing, and I just don't see that. Or it could be any kind of little thing that they bring up, because the point is they're already thinking why you're not going to get moved forward. So the other way to have that second question is, and if they say we have a lot of candidates, to say, I'm assuming then if you do have quite a few candidates, you'll be having another round of interviews. Is there any reason that you can think of that you wouldn't move me forward for that second round of interviews? And again, what they're going to say is, much of the time they will give you some clue. And like I said, they're already thinking it. You are the only one. If you don't ask that question, you are the only one that doesn't know. So we tell people in sales all the time, you want to uncover the objection. Don't be afraid to ask. In fact, search for the objection of why they aren't going to buy. Search for why they aren't going to hire you. Then you have the opportunity to say why you would help. What's your answer to why you would overcome that objection? And give them something else to think about. I had this in my own personal situation, and I used it and effectively used it. And I can't tell you countless people that I've recommended this to that have come back to me and said, I had no idea they were thinking, they had some perception that I don't even know where it came from, but I was able to overcome that. So I stand strongly in saying there's several ways to follow up on that.
Cool. We have another question about getting a job when you're fresh out of college, and Nuss, you're the closest one fresh out of college of the three of us. So why don't you handle that?
Oh gosh, it's still been a couple of years. I'm not gonna lie. I think for me, how I started. Well, I guess I'll tell you my brother's story. So my brother graduated from KU, go Jayhawks, just a couple of years ago, and his degree was in finance and economics, and he took a look at what all he wanted to do, and did kind of what Denise said, narrow down what you feel you're good at, or what excites you. And that helped him narrow down what to do, and then just start applying, making sure while you're in college, leveraging the internship opportunities, the volunteering opportunities. And a lot of times when you've done those things, you can go back to that client or the company and say, hey, are you hiring? Because, I've been here and I know the system. And a lot of times internships do end up becoming actual jobs after graduation. And then looking for those entry-level jobs. I'm an HR person, so I know how annoying this can be, but on the part where you're applying for a job, if you find a job online and you're like, this is what I want to do, and I'm short 1 year of experience or whatever, I still go ahead and apply. I would still go ahead and apply and get your resume in their ATS, and you might not get the job this time, but the next time they're looking and they're going through their database before they start putting the job out there, they might call you and say, hey, are you interested? And that's happened to me before. Right out of college, I'd applied to go work at KU Med, and I got a call from them maybe a couple of years ago saying, hey, we have this ERP position. Are you interested? So definitely do that, because, it's just a lot of times it's getting your name out there. And if you apply and don't get the job, you didn't lose anything more than maybe an hour of your time. It's definitely, worth applying. And then use your referrals. Now, leverage those referrals, because my brother got his job at State Street. He's currently at State Street through Kinsey, who is another recruiter at our company, because her brother-in-law used to work at State Street 8 years ago. It does not matter where they are currently, but if just leverage those referrals, because they will make your life so much easier.
Yeah. And Nuss, you used a term that I don't think many people know. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. It's where your resume lands when you apply online to a job. It's a piece of software that recruiters use to search. And networking is huge. My son, we celebrated his college graduation 2 weeks ago yesterday, and I saw that a job was at Shamrock Trading Group, which if you're fresh out of college and looking for a job, go look there. They're hiring 600 people, I think, and this is on the healthcare side. I said healthcare is coming along. It's helping people navigate the Medicare process. So I happen to know somebody there, and he sent his resume into their applicant tracking system, and then I gave him the name and address of the person he needed to reach out to. He did that, and he got a phone call out of the blue, and I know that it's because I gave him that referral. So so that's the entry level. We have another question about, I worked for a company for 25 years and was promoted from within. How big of a negative is that? Denise, I was with the company for 18 when you hired me, so why don't you answer that?
Well, clearly we made the wrong call, right? Let's start with
That's right,
that.
you're breaking up.
Yeah, so I think you use whichever way you use it to your advantage. If you have smaller experience is a better word, then you can use that to your advantage. If you have the 18 plus years or the many years experience, you can use that to your advantage. For some people, it's about how you phrase it and how you say, you know, in those to use your example, Dave, in those 18 years, I wasn't just in one static place that time. I had tremendous growth. I learned all of these things. I had additional responsibilities, etc. But what you can absolutely count on for me is I am not a job hopper. I am not looking to jump around from job to job. I am looking for my next home. And I hope it's another 18 years, but wherever it is, I will not move until it is the right thing and it's another home. And I want to be loyal to you and your company just like I was the last 18 years. For me, hearing that as the owner and majority owner and CEO, I listen to that and I'm like, you know, I don't want to hire someone who is going to take this for a few months and try it. I know when Dave says yes, he's going to land and this will be home. So use it like that to your advantage. And again, for many people, if you hear the thing, well, you've only worked for one company and cultures are so different, etc., you know, then I would argue that I hear this sometimes with some of the larger companies. It's like, well, you've only worked at Sprint for X number of years, so how could you be adaptable to other environments? I would argue, I've worked at Sprint for X number of years, so I've worked for how many different companies?
Yeah.
I mean, how many changes have I had to be adaptable to and thrive through? So you can use whatever it is you can use, and feel free afterwards, we'll put up our contact information if you want additional clarification. You can use whichever it is to your advantage, but write it down as Ness suggested.
I'll add a really quick thing to that, Dave. I recently had a friend or an acquaintance, whatever you want to call it, make that change. And one thing he used was, hey, even though I've been at this same company 11 years, look at all the other things I've done, the certifications I've gotten. I went back to school and got my master's. So be able to kind of, if you have those things, be able to leverage that as well and point those things out, because those are very important, and how you've stayed up with the times, quote unquote.
Yep. We've got a couple minutes left and a couple questions to answer, so we'll get to them. Parker asks, what should your job search schedule look like if you're still working full time? Well, obviously, your job search schedule is probably going to have to work around your paid job schedule, but it is your job. So now you have two jobs. You've got the job that you're paid for, and you have the search schedule. Things that you can do off hours, if you have a regular Monday through Friday 8 to 5 job, you can do research on companies. You can connect to people. You can send messages. You can interact, because as a recruiter, I do a lot of work outside of the 8 to 5 because the people that I'm recruiting are working 8 to 5, and I bother them if I'm talking to them during business hours. So we do a lot of evening calls. So there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of these things that we talked about with Meetup and so forth, those happen in the evenings anyway. And so networking is a very easy thing to do in the evening as well. And then the other question that we have is when you're networking and you're answering the question, what are you looking for? How do you avoid boxing yourself in? And how do you keep yourself at a wide range? I know everybody will have an answer. I'm going to give mine real quick. I think you need to have 2 or 3 very specific targets, because if you just give them a general wide thing, it's not as memorable, and it makes it more difficult for me to help you. When I was looking for something between my previous employer and AdamsGabbert, I wanted to either work from home 100% of the time and just recruit, or I wanted to go and run the business. And I got my second choice, and I'm glad I did, because I've been working from home 100% of the time for 10 weeks, and I found out I don't like it. So, so I had two very specific things that I was searching for, and I unpacked that just a little bit in a conversation. And so you don't want to get like real specific, but you do want to be specific when answering that question. Anybody else have thoughts?
I agree. I think narrow it down, you know, like Denise said, look at what comes up over and over again in your search, and use that to, you know, navigate your next position. I think it's really hard to say, you know, you're open to everything, because I'm in an HR world, I can say I'm open to any HR, you know, part of the world, but I really do not want to be doing X. Like, I do not want to be the person in charge of firing people every single time. That can't be my only job. Or I don't want to only be doing recruiting, because I can go be a recruiter. But I think find those specific things that you like to do, and help that navigate or lead your search for sure.
No, I will add just very quickly.
Go ahead, Denise.
I was going to say, I'll add just very quickly.
So you have more important things to talk about.
I would add very quickly, if you think about this as this huge buffet, and the buffet is full of all of this amazing looking food, which is also, by the way, your amazing background of everything that you've done, both in paid jobs and volunteer jobs, in everything that you've done, and you have a small plate that you can put the things on, and you only have enough room for a few things. Make sure you're putting the things on there that are going to be the biggest differentiator, the ones that will catch attention, that are the ones that you are going to love the most. And if you just think about what Nuss and Dave both said, but think about it from that perspective, you all still have that in your background, but go with that first course, if you will, of the things that matter the most.
That's awesome. I've had the resources slide up for just a hot second, and so those are all links, and we will give you the deck so you can link to all that. I did not get the link up there for the Zoom on Monday, but we will email that to you. If you guys need anything from us as a follow-up, the email address is super easy, askag@AdamsGabbert. We're so glad that you joined us. Thank you very much for coming in. Yeah. Hope you got a lot out of it. I hope we see some of you on Monday. Please let us know if we can do anything else. All right? Cool.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy your day.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.